Welcome to the Test Guild Automation Podcast, where we all get together to learn more about automation and software testing with your host, Joe Calantonio.
Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast. And today we'll be talking with Surat all about Visual Regression Tracker, FitNesse, and automation testing in general. He's been doing test automation since 2002, so we're going to cover a lot of things here. He's worked with many companies, from startups to Fortune 500 companies across various domains. Currently, he is an automation architect working in the San Francisco Bay Area. He has also lots of experience in developing in-house automation frameworks based on open source tools, and he advocates product experts like QA and BAs to write, execute, and maintain their own automated cases, thereby reducing dependency on automation engineers to achieve automation goals for each team. I'm sure we'll dive into that as well. And he oversees automation engineers writing generic framework code, finding solutions for automation challenges, and building infrastructure to help support the team. So this is going to be a full stack pipeline interview. You don't want to miss it. He also contributes to a lot of open source tools as well that we'll touch upon. And he promotes automation and tests, build, process, or any task that can be automated, which I am 100% behind. I think you're really going to dig this episode. You don't want to miss it. Check it out. The Test Guild Automation Podcast is sponsored by the fantastic folks at Sauce Labs, the cloud-based test platform that helps ensure you can develop with confidence at every step, from code to deployment, for every framework, browser, OS, mobile device, and API. Get a free trial. Visit testguild.com/Sauce Labs and click on the exclusive sponsors section to try it for free today. Check it out. Hey, Surat, welcome to the Guild.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Awesome to have you. You have just the right experience of what I'm looking for an automation engineer. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. Before we get into it, though, anything I missed in your bio that you want the Guild to know more about?
No, I think you covered most of what I have been doing so far. I have been advocating the open source tools, and there's been build versus buy conversation for quite some time now. I belong to the crowd where I actually build. And when I say build, it does not mean you write from scratch for everything. You get a lot of open source tools, you just integrate them, and then you code only when it's needed. And that way you get the flexibility, and that's what I have been doing. Yeah, I think you covered most of it.
Cool. So already I'm off the tracks here, but when you say build versus buy, is there any time you think people should buy something, though? Are there any situations where you see a company where you're like, I wouldn't trust them to build anything, so they're probably better off buying something?
I would say, unless there's a compelling reason, we should never buy it. The reason is there are so many solutions out there, and if you buy today, you will have only your goals or your requirement at this point of time. But going forward, the requirements always change. The evolving needs are changing all the time. So the tool that you bought may not be able to scale up with the requirement that we have. But if, on the other hand, if you have a good automation engineers and they are very good in coding, we can always scale it up based on our need, or we can always change based on our requirement.
So one of the tools I was surprised to see, which I haven't seen in a while, is FitNesse. And you seem to be an expert in FitNesse. It's an older tool. Maybe I'm behind times. I haven't kept up to speed with its development. Is it still being updated? Why do you use FitNesse? I guess is my first question. What is FitNesse for people that don't even know?
I will give a little background on why we decided to go with FitNesse. So let's look at a typical workflow of automation, how we automate test cases. QA normally gets a requirement. He or she writes the test cases. He automates them one by one using one of the testing framework like TestNG, JUnit, or any of the other unit test framework. And then to write those test cases, we also have to write the code using some other libraries like Selenium, APM, or REST issued, and so on. So let's say if you can segregate this part, one, writing the test cases using the methods that we have written already. And the other part is not the test classes, but the other classes where we have the logic implemented. If you write the test case, you will probably write just like a how end user will write the steps. So it's sequence of steps. That's the test cases, I would say. But to perform those steps one by one, we have to write the code behind, which goes in a separate class. Probably we'll write the separate class so that our test classes are as simple as possible. Just a sequence of steps and assertions. So if we have this kind of segregation, one person who is expert in product features, they write only the test cases, and the other person or other team who are really good in framework, they write the all other code behind. If you can think of these as a two separate aspects. One is experts writing the test cases alone. They don't care much about the internal logic, which is abstracted away within the framework code, and the framework team writes the framework code. So if you can think about these two segregation, one is the test code versus framework code. So now, in order to write the test cases, you still have to have person knowing like the test framework. They have to know the coding. They have to know the version control and so on. You have to set up correctly with the right Java version, or if it's other framework, you have to know the right version installed on their machine. You have to have admin rights and so on. So this is where FitNesse comes in nicely. With the FitNesse, what we can do is, instead of writing the methods in TestNG, we can write the methods in a clear plain text format in a website. If we can write that and we feed in the framework code that I talked about a little bit earlier to FitNesse, so FitNesse knows which method to invoke, which classes to invoke, and that will do for us. So that way we can completely get away from having to install anything on a machine, having to know coding, and having to compile and build and version control. All this stuff we can completely do away with. So with that in mind, if we have FitNesse, now just to give a little background for the listeners on what FitNesse is, it's an acceptance test driven framework, and it is also a wiki server. It's an open source tool which you can download as a jar file from the FitNesse website. You can run it as Java jar and the jar file on any other port, and then it is available for everybody to use it as a web page or as a wiki server. So because it's accessible to everybody, each tester or each QA member doesn't have to set up their own local machine. They don't have to worry about TestNG. They don't have to worry about compiling the code, version control, and so on. So that's how we started with the FitNesse, and because we can get up and we can hit the road quickly. We can easily write the test cases. We can execute them. We can see the report right and there, and we know this test case is really automated. I have run it. I've seen the report, and I'm good, and they can move on.
Cool. So I think people might be more familiar with keyword-driven approaches and Cucumber, but this sounds like the server piece is the unique piece, because a lot of times, even with Cucumber and those other things, you need to install it. You need to have all the Java versions. You need to have all the Selenium bindings. Someone needs to know how to use it. So it seems like the wiki is used almost like a human, English-like syntax that's written. And behind the scenes, you have layers, and that layer then calls a more technical step that maybe an automation engineer had implemented with the coding. So the front end user then no longer needs to really know code in an ideal world. Am I understanding that?
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yes.
And so you've been using it for a while now. So I assume it's working well for you. How big is your team, and has this any challenges you've seen using this approach?
Yeah. So there are a few. Now, before I go to the challenges, I'll just briefly talk about how it works in our organization.
Sure.
So what we do here is, now I belong to the framework team, where we actually take care of the framework, where we write the generic framework. Now, again, when I say generic, it means, let's take example of a REST API testing. If you go to any REST API, it has the standards, right? You have an endpoint, you have a request body, headers, and so on. You get the response, you get something out of the response, you do the assertion, and based on the response, probably you will call the next API. So this never changes for any team. It is the same for all. So we write that part of code, and any team, based on their endpoint, based on their request body, any team will be able to write their own test cases. regardless of how it is, because I don't need to know what the test case is. QA will need to know. They'll write their own test case based on their logic. In fact, we can write it even before our product is ready, because we have the specification. We know how the request should look like. We know how the response should look like. If we have this specification body, we can write in the FitNesse test case right there, and we can test it. We can do a pure test-driven development with FitNesse. Now, I'm not saying we cannot do TestNG. We can do TestNG or Gemini too for this kind of thing. So there are, I know at least 4 teams who have been doing, but then again, they are maintaining their own test case. I do not go and monitor their test cases, regularly, because they have the confidence now to write their own test cases, and they come to framework team only if there is a new requirement. I will give a new requirement. For example, they say, I need to be able to connect to 2 databases, one on the cloud, one in the on-premise databases. Now, initially, we did not have that capability. So we as a framework team go there and implement it. Okay, you enable connecting to 2 databases, for example. And another example is like when we do not have the access to direct database connectivity because of security issue. So how can we solve this problem? We need to, like, for example, there's some coded pin which we have to get it from databases because we cannot read from SMS or something as part of automation. So that's where framework team comes in and solves these type of problems. So yeah, I would say for API, there are at least 4 teams who have been using. Now, in terms of test case, I can give a rough count, but I will not be able to give you the exact count because they maintain their own test cases. And similarly, this framework we have integrated with mobile, and we also have integrated with the web. And like I said, API and database already are integrated. So that's with the structure that we have here. Nice. And we, as part of the same test case, we should be able to do mobile, web, API, database, all as part of the same test cases. We can mix and match in the same test case. That's the capability that we brought in. Now, again, this is nothing specific to FitNesse. It's against with the framework.
Right. So FitNesse, because it's acting like an interface, the user doesn't care what technology is behind the scenes. So I assume you can switch out, say, for some reason you were using Selenium, like, oh, let's go to Playwright. Some functions, I guess, you could just easily swap that out with newer technology, and none of your test cases change because it's just the bottom layer, right? So cool. Right,
you gave the exact example that we did.
Right.
We actually tried with Playwright, and test cases did not change. They did not even know that we are doing Playwright. Nice. The reports, even report, for example, we changed the reporting from Extend to report portal. Nice. Without them having to know anything. Okay, what's going on? I don't know. So, but these are things that we can work behind the scenes. So you can think of it like we removed TestNG, replaced it with FitNesse. When I say TestNG, just the test class, not the entire thing, just the test class.
Right.
So that coming back to your other question on what are the disadvantages, like I said, in FitNesse, in the page you can write plain text. So when you write plain text, it's very easy to make mistakes. Like if you would say spelling mistake, it's gone. It'll not find the method name. Okay, it'll just give up throwing exception on the FitNesse page saying, okay, I cannot find this method. So that's one thing that we really have to be very careful. So to solve that, I can think of 2 approaches. One is you maintain one Excel where you have the drop down of the method names, so you can only pick and choose from those list of implemented methods. You can use those. And the one that we implemented here is we as a framework team built one Angular website. So you just type in whatever you want, like verify. You type verify, it'll give you the list of the methods implemented for verification. So you pick and choose from there and copy and paste it there instead of blindly writing a plain text.
Nice.
So that's one. The other things that I can think of is it doesn't support parallel run, like TestNG or other framework, where you actually can run multiple test cases in parallel. So that is not supported by FitNesse.
All right, how do you get around that? That's a huge one, I would think, for teams.
All right, so what we can do is we can have FitNesse server running on multiple machines, so multiple servers, and we can split the test cases manually. Okay, this FitNesse server will run only this suite, maybe subsuite, the other one the subsuite, and that's how we do it. And moreover, we rotate, like the main reason for, so there are two things. One is parallel, one is the distribution. The parallel is write all the test cases in all the browsers. If we normally don't do that, because we know our product, right? We know what has changed. So it doesn't make sense to run all tests in all browsers. It is more of a just feel good factor. Yeah. Like it doesn't have logic all the time saying, okay, why are you doing that? Yeah. So what we do is in sprint wise, right? One sprint, let's do in Chrome. The other sprint, let's do in Firefox. The next sprint, we do some other browser. That way we have coverage over the over a period of time. We'll have coverage in all the browsers. So later point of time, if UI has not changed, probably we don't have to test in all the browsers. Right. So that's another thing that we do. On the next problem, okay, so we talked about it's easy to make mistake because it's plain text. Yep. And second, we talked about parallel run. And the other problem that we have is if you have only one FitNesse server, remember it is accessible by everybody who can access the server. It means, let's say you are running the test. Some other person is running the test at the same time. Both of them will work, but it is limited by, let's say you are executing on an emulator, for example, or on a real device. Let's say you have only one device, and both of triggered a mobile test case, which will try to hit the same device. Then one person will not know the other person that he is executing. That's another problem that we may run into this issue. So for this, the solution is run through Jenkins only, so that it can queues up. It queues up. The other solution is, let's have your FitNesse server for your team alone. Right. So running FitNesse server is very easy because you don't have to do any setup. It's just a Java jar, and that's all.
Can you Dockerize it?
Yeah, you can Dockerize it too.
Cool.
Yeah. And the last problem that I can think of is, it doesn't happen very often. Like, let's say if you refactor a method name, remember all method names are written in a plain text in the text case, right? Yep. So if we rename the method name, our test cases will break.
Right.
Because it will not know which method to call, right, because it's simple plain text. So again, we can use some shell command to modify all the test cases with a single command. We can do that.
All right. So how often does that happen? Is that a common occurrence?
No, it doesn't happen. A few examples. It happens mostly with the UI layer. For example, you have login. So initially, let's say we just wrote login with username and password. That's a method name, for example. Yep. Now, let's say our test cases grow and we increase in coverage. So there can be login in the mobile, there can be login in the website. So FitNesse will get confused which login to call. Is it for mobile? Is it for web? So let's say we decide to change the name, login in web with this username and password, login in mobile with this username and password. This is one example when we change the method names.
Cool. So, I'm just thinking of this approach, pros and cons. One pro is I worked with a team, enterprise team that uses BDD, and we said we're going to empower everyone to do automation, and everyone's going to be able to code. And the problem with that is each sprint team, even though there was an existing function called login, they'd write their own login because they didn't want to touch anyone else's code. It seems like the way you wrote this, you have separation where they can't write any code. They actually need to go to the framework team to implement whatever they're trying to do. And you say, hey, wait a minute, we already have a login, use this login. So you avoid code duplication, it sounds, using your approach. Am I on this? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Cool. And like say, if it's a big team, we can have our own class for that team. Like we write a dedicated class for their team alone. Yeah. So in FitNesse, we say, okay, for this set of test cases, use only this class, not everywhere. Don't look everywhere else. We can do that too.
Nice.
Like for example, when we do the framework code, right, we just make a jar out of it, and we give the jar location to FitNesse, so that FitNesse know which classes to look for. So for a specific team, we can have a specific jar file if it's needed, so that FitNesse will not get confused which method to look for.
Cool. So how, you talked about, you said it integrates already with CI and Jenkins. I'm also thinking of BDD. What was good is we could use tags. So say for some reason we didn't want to run certain tests because we had tags in it, even though it was plain text. We could say and we could pass a parameter like defilter at runtime, don't run this tag or just run these tags. Do you have that type of functionality as well with FitNesse?
Sure. So currently what we do is we write the test cases. You can tag, you can add multiple tags for a test case. You can have priority 1, priority 2, for example, tags, or you can have, okay, this is this connects to database, and if for some reason you want to avoid running the database related test cases like access issues and so on, we can decide not to run database related test cases. So you can tag your test cases based on what you what it supports or when you don't want to run it. And then the only way to execute those test cases for a specific tag is by giving the query parameter in the URL. Ultimately, it's a web server, so you have to hit the URL, and with the query parameter you append the tags. So run this tag.
Oh, okay. Because it's a server. You just in Jenkins do a command with the URL with the parameters you want to append to it, and it knows what to do.
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So I know a lot of times people once again use BDD and tools like Serenity is really good reporting. How's the reporting? Is there anything you need to do special with FitNesse to get reporting to work for you?
So when you execute a test, we have the test written in a web page, and you can click the test button, it tests, and it will show you the default FitNesse report. Now, most of the times, like for example, if we go to JUnit report, right? We have JUnit report as an XML. We can publish it, but we don't normally publish it for wider audience. Default JUnit XML. We normally come up with the report portal, extent, or Allure, and so on. So these all can also be done with the FitNesse code, because it is not, FitNesse by itself doesn't run any code. It runs the code that we feed into it. Mm-hmm. So normally we integrate this type of reporting with our framework code. So when you are done with the FitNesse test, it creates that report for us, and we can publish through Jenkins. If we're running through Jenkins, we can publish it, or in FitNesse you can give link to that report HTML file, so it can show in the FitNesse itself. The other cool thing about FitNesse is that we have talked about only test case writing and test execution, but this, because it's a wiki, we can use it for documentation as well. So in the same test case, we can write it, okay, this test case does this and this as a plain text, as a formatted plain text. Or like, for example, we can place some files like XLS or some special files. You can download it through FitNesse by giving links. So you can do all those stuff.
Nice. Yeah, I used to work once again for a large healthcare company, and if you ever audited, you have to show them your test cases, and this way they prove to me what you test and what you're testing. Because it's in an English language, you just point them to a wiki. It must be very easy to do something like that.
Yeah, and the other problem is like TestNG, for example, right? If we are writing test case, we have to commit ourselves. Like every QA member should know Git. They should know how to resolve conflicts and so on. Yep. So with FitNesse, you don't have to worry about this.
Nice. So I guess the next question I would have is where are the test cases stored? I guess it's a server, so is it also stored in FitNesse and on the FitNesse server?
So what we do is every test case that we write, it creates a .wiki. It's kind of text file with the extension of .wiki. So all these text files, we upload it to our Git periodically. Like you can set it to upload all test cases on daily basis, on need basis. So they all go in our Git repository. So when you set up a new server, we download all the test cases from Git and feed into the FitNesse, and FitNesse will be able to read all those test cases.
So it's also version control then too?
Yes, it is version control, yeah.
Perfect.
FitNesse has its own version control, like through zip files and like through Git as well. Like every change you do, it'll commit to Git, but then we don't do it because there are too many commits. So we decide to do periodic commits or need basis commit.
Cool. So as you mentioned, FitNesse is like a UI interface, and behind the scenes is layers, and you can use any technology. One popular technology nowadays is visual regression testing or visual validation testing. And in our pre-show, you talked about actually using a tool called Visual Regression Tracker. So I thought maybe we jump into that really quick, maybe give people a little idea of what is Visual Regression Tracker.
Sure. So many of the times you may think we should, okay, so our tests are good for functional testing, but we also have to do the visual testing to make sure that the alignment is right, the font color and everything is right on the web page or on a mobile app. So in order to do that, we have a commercial solution like Apply Tools where you can do that. But there is an open source tool available called Visual Regression Tracker. If you go to GitHub and look for this, you will get it. This was created and maintained by Pavel Strunkin, and this is something that we are using to meet our visual regression goals. So what we do here is it's a simple Docker Compose file which you can download and just run as a Docker container. So in the container you will have the UI, the services layer, the Postgres databases, everything in the Docker container, and you will be given one UI, just like I would not say Apply Tools, but just to give an analogy, this is how it will look like. You'll have you can log in, you can get your API key, and with those API key you will be able to write the code needed to send the images to the Visual Regression Tracker. Once it is sent to the VRT tool, you can either approve or reject the changes. If it's first time, there is no baseline. Obviously, you have to approve or reject. But from the next run onwards, it will show you the changes that has happened since last baseline. You can also apply the ignore areas. If there's any dynamic part, like something that you keeps changing, animations or all those things, you can ignore those, or you can specify just this area to be compared, and don't ignore everything else, but compare only this area. You can also have your regression tracker compared branch wise if you have multiple branches for your project. So you can do that, and if you're happy with one branch, you can merge the baselines onto another branch. You can do that too. And yes, I think, yeah, that's in brief what it does.
How reliable is it? Like, this goes back to the build versus buy. And you said usually there's open source tools. A lot of people don't know there's I've heard about this a while ago, but I don't know how many people are actually aware that there's a visual validation tool that's open source and free. But you also have, like you said, big players that have invested lots of money in this technology as well. So a lot of knocks that people say is, oh, with visual testing is you're going to get pixel to pixel differences. And so therefore, that's why you want to buy something versus use an open source technology. How has your experience been with this tool, though, for reliability point of view?
Sure. So it uses the JavaScript framework, and in JavaScript you have, at least in this tool, we have 3 different libraries to compare. One is pixel to pixel comparison. The other one is, it's called looks same. That's a library. It doesn't do pixel to pixel, but it does like, for example, if you have a caret like blinking, so it will ignore that part. So it has those kind of logic. And there is another, I forgot the name of another library, but these are the 3 different ways we can do it. So you can play with one of them and see which one you like it. And even for the pixel to pixel exact match, you can define the tolerance. Okay, for example, I'm happy with 1% tolerance. So yeah, please go ahead and approve, even if there's a difference of 1% difference. So you can define this tolerance level. And so far we have been, once in a while it happens, like because it's a very pixel to pixel comparison, especially if you're taking your images, for example, right? You have to take the images from your test cases at a very specific time. If it's too early or too late, then you may see some pixel differences. So I think it's a problem with problem will be same for any tools you use. It depends on specific time of your screenshot taking. For example, Selenium, right? If you take a little bit early, maybe it has not loaded completely, so you'll see a few pixels off. So that's one of the challenge that we are seeing. Other than now again, I would say it's not a framework related thing. It's more of our test case that we may have to Either we have to wait for something, or we have to do sleep so that it settles down before we take the screenshot. And speaking of that, for a mobile, it's very it's very reliable if we use the native frameworks, XUI Test and Espresso. I've seen it's very reliable than APM, especially the screen comparison part.
Good to know. So what I like about you is you lead by example. So you highly promote open source. And the only way I think open source is successful is people actually contributing to it. And so I think you mentioned in the pre-show that not only did you start using this tool, but you actually contributed. So you could just give a little story around maybe people that are listening that may be using open source tools, why you decide to contribute some of your free time to an open source project.
Okay, so this, so I'll give two examples. One is the, not two, I will give three examples. One is the FitNesse itself.
Yep.
So my boss came and said, I know you can see the test cases in FitNesse, but I don't know how many test cases are there in this suite. It's not visible in the UI until I run it. Okay, so I said, I get what you mean. So by looking at the top level, you want to know how many test cases are inside it. So I went ahead and implemented and merged the code with FitNesse itself. So that's one example where you really get the benefit of open source tooling. If you have something you know how to implement, you will get it immediately. The other is a FitNesse plugin, for example, to Jenkins, right? Initially, it did not support authenticated FitNesse. So if there's an authenticated FitNesse, it will fail. So I went ahead and added those logic so that even if I have authenticated FitNesse, I'll be able to give username and password in Jenkins. It will take it. The other example is like FitNesse was not generating JUnit style of XML file. So I went ahead and gave JUnit XML. Because I have the JUnit XML generated as part of FitNesse, I can feed into and integrate with other systems like TestRail, TestLink. Right? I can feed the results with the code onto those test management system. And the other example with Visual Regression Tester is like it's still developing, it's still new, it's just 1.5 years old. So they're adding a lot of features. So I thought, okay, there are a lot of features that I personally needed. So I went ahead and added those features into this Visual Regression Tracker. And it's like, for example, log analysis, right? If somebody deletes a build, somebody approves a baseline, for example, I need to know who did that or when it was done. Those examples. Another example is like did not have a help. And nobody reads documentation. If there's a help in the web page, it's very easy. They will click and see it. So I implemented that so that others know what is a build, what is a variation, how do I approve the baseline, what does it mean to integrate with a specific language framework like Java, JavaScript, how do I do it? Add the examples. I did all of those. And I also did on the backend side, for example, the approve all, right? Initially, when it started, you had to go each image approve, next image approve. So it's a click, 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 hundreds of times if you have so many images. So I added the approve all button. So in the first run, you can approve all if you're happy with it. So these are some of the examples that we went ahead and done.
So I guess where did you get the time? Were you able to do it during work? Because your company uses open source, they also realize, okay, we're going to have to give back. Are you doing it on the weekends? Like, how does that work out?
Yes. So most of the features that I added is something that I also needed it.
Right.
It's not with the intention of giving back. It's like, okay, it's a good tool. I like it. I need this. Probably other people also need it. And I also went through their issue list in the GitHub. I said, okay, some people is requesting for that. That's interesting. I went ahead and added.
Cool.
So it was useful for them. It was useful for me too. And yeah, of course, you with open source, you really have to spend time during your personal time to be able to. And it's a learning too. It's actually challenging and fun too. You'll enjoy once you start doing it.
Absolutely. And so just a quick, where'd you hear about Regression Tracker? Just curious to know.
Sure. In last year, around December time, I don't know if I read one of your blog or I read one of your podcasts. I saw mention of Visual Regression Tracker. Okay, wait. In the past, I was doing with Image Magic. That's another library.
That's what I used.
And Yeah, and then you had to do a lot of coding for that. Okay, so okay, if you really want to do that, there must be some better way. And the moment I heard from you, I went ahead and looked it up in GitHub, found it, and started using it right away. And because it's Docker based, you don't have to do a lot of setup. You just download the Docker Compose and start using it. And thank you for that. I mean, it all came from this and your Test Guild podcast.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I'm glad that the community is benefiting from it. So this is awesome. So thank you for contributing and help spreading the automation awesomeness around. So that's awesome. Okay, Surat, before we go, is there one piece of actionable advice you can give to someone to help them with their automation testing efforts in general, or with FitNesse or with Visual Tracker? And what's the best way to find or contact you?
Yes. So the advice that I would say I would give to everybody is like whatever solutions we're using, let's try to improve upon it, because automation field is changing very, very fast. So whatever I'm saying today, after 1 year, maybe you will have a different and better solution maybe. So we have to constantly upgrade ourselves, upskill ourselves so that we get the best out of it. And we cannot rely on automation engines to have all the test cases automated. We have to have everybody involved in the automation to be successful in the automation journey. And in my experience, I found FitNesse is a very big stepping stone for everybody, so that they get into this automation journey together. And I am available at my email address, which is Surat, surat.das@gmail.com. That's the email that I can be contacted at.
Thanks again for your automation awesomeness. The links to everything of value we covered in this episode, head on over to testguild.com/A373. And while you're there, make sure to click on the Try for Free Today link under the exclusive sponsor section to learn all about Sauce Labs' awesome products and services. And if the show has helped you in any way, why not rate it and review it in iTunes? Reviews really help in the rankings of the show, and I read each and every one of them. So that's it for this episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast. I'm Joe, and my mission is to help you succeed with creating end-to-end, full-stack automation awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Test Guild Automation Podcast. Head on over to testguild.com for full show notes, amazing blog articles, and online testing conferences. Don't forget to subscribe to the Guild to continue your testing journey.